According to some Christians and some Jews, God created humanity about 6,000 years ago. Whether they are correct or not, this is how humanity started out and lived for thousands of years. For all these thousands of years, people were born and died, and God did not care to have any connection with them, with us. Then humanity started to develop. People learned how to grow crops for food, domesticate animals, small communities developed. Yet still God wanted nothing to do with his, her, its creation. These early primitive societies must have been very evil and immoral, because around 2500 BCE, God decided to destroy most of humanity in a huge flood. 2500 BCE is also around the time that the first cities were developed in modern-day Egypt, Iraq, and China. But I'm not going into that. According to the Judeo-Christian Islamic belief system, the only people and animals to survive were those that found safety in Noah's Ark. With Noah is the first time since creation that God had any connection with humanity, well, aside from destroying most of it during the flood. To cement this connection, God made the first covenant with humanity. It is called the Noahic covenant. In this covenant, God blesses Noah and his sons, and tells them to populate the earth. God places all animals under human control. God promises that he will never again destroy life on earth by flood. In return, God forbids the eating of meat with blood still in it, forbids murder, and God commands humankind to shed the blood of those who shed blood. To seal the deal, God creates the rainbow as a sign of this covenant for all ages to come. Jews, Christians, and Muslims all agree that Noah lived somewhere in the Middle East. So maybe Noah and his family looked something like this. Of course, this was a very long time ago, so no one knows for sure exactly what the people who lived in the Middle East looked like. Now there are two options. One is that this flood really did kill off every person in the world, and in a few thousand years, Noah's family was able to morph from this into the different types of human races. The other option is that this flood was localized in the Middle East. If God is real and the story of the flood is true, I find that guessing that the flood was localized in the Middle East the more plausible option. That means that out of all the areas and peoples of the earth, God chose only people living in the Middle East to kill off and then make a covenant with the survivors. For example, God had not wished to kill off and then make a covenant with the people living in Africa, China, Australia, or the Americas. Now fast forward to the next covenant that God decided to make with members of humanity. This takes place around 2000 BCE. This covenant was with Abraham, or as Muslims call him, Ibrahim. The deal this time was that God would make Abraham's descendants into a great nation, and in return, Abraham's male descendants would have to get circumcised. Side note here, Abraham had two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Muslims believe that Ishmael's descendants became the Arabs, which eventually produced Muhammad, the last and truest prophet of God. Jews believe that Isaac's descendants became the Jews. Christians also believe that Isaac's descendants became the Jews. But more importantly, Isaac's descendants include Jesus Christ. Once again, God chooses to make a covenant with people living in the Middle East, and could care less about the many other people living in the other parts of the world. After this, there are two more covenants, the covenant with Lot and the covenant with Jacob. Basically, they are the same thing. God promising Lot and Jacob, along with their descendants, land and power. Next comes the Mosaic covenant, as in Moses. Here God promises to make the children of Israel his special possession among all people if they obey God and observe the Sabbath. Once again, God proves that God could care less about the people not living in the Middle East. After this, there are some, by comparison, minor covenants, like the Israel covenant and the Davidic covenant. Next comes Jesus Christ, and as Christians call it, the New Covenant. Once again, God chooses to make its message known in the Middle East, and could care less about the peoples living in China, Africa, Australia, or the Americas. Finally comes the Islamic covenant, where God enters into a covenant with Muhammad, impressing into his shoulder the seal of prophecy. And once again, God chooses someone, Muhammad, from the Middle East, totally ignoring the rest of the world. God sure as hell has a fixation on the Middle East. To all Jews, Christians, and Muslims, I would like to ask, why do you think this is? As I see it, there are only two options. One, God is a racist, because for the majority of human history was only concerned with Middle Easterners. Two, God is a made-up fiction of the people living in the Middle East. Which of these two possibilities is the more likely?